Balancing League of Legends is a perpetual endeavor of tipping from one side to another, from weak to strong. Whether champions, runes, objectives, or items, there will never come a day where the game has reached a state of perfect equilibrium. Be that as it may, the balanced team would rather die trying. On occasion, however, there might be instances where an element of the game is practically never involved in that discussion, and that tends to be as a result of there being something fundamentally flawed with it. Champions and runes come and go very often, I think. Even those with a perennially low pick rate have moments of attention. Items, on the other hand, despite being a universally accessible part of the game no matter what champion you're playing, have the highest tendency to get neglected for some reason. There's always a handful of items that practically never get purchased, even in scenarios where one would think they might be beneficial. It could just be chalked up to poor stats, but over the decade or so I've been playing this game for, I've come across a number of items that have been there for literal years and still never get picked up that much. So in today's video we'll be going over items that no one ever seems to build and explain what's preventing them from becoming more relevant. Before we get started though, in light of the season having reset for a third split a couple weeks ago, I want to give a shout out to our sponsor for today, TapNGG. TapNGG is a one-stop shop where you can find the perfect duo partner for you. Whether you want to have a skillful player to help your odds in solo queue, a group of players you want to squad up with in flex, someone to vibe with an ARAM and arena partner, or see if you have the wrist to make up for being pissed slow by duoing with the gamer girl. On a more serious note, as stated earlier, the season has reset once again, and like with any season, the primary concern on everyone's mind is how they start, because I speak from experience when I say that how you start can make all the difference between being hard stuck and MMR screwed, or winners queuing your way to whatever elo you're aiming for in a matter of a dozen games at most. It's for that reason I recommend Tapin to start out by ensuring that at least one of your 4 teammates have more than 2 brain cells. Feel free to use my link on screen or in the description below and let me know how your climb is going so far. Thanks again to Tapin for sponsoring the video, but for now, let's get back on topic. While there have been no shortage of items across the game's now 15-year tenure, many of them with this exact property have been lost to time. And there are also items that are popular now, but in the past they weren't for one reason or another. If I were to go through every single unpopular item in history, then we'd be here forever. For brevity's sake, let's just talk about the ones that are purchasable now, and I have 3 of them to go over. But to better understand why people don't purchase certain items, we should first analyze why people do purchase certain items. What is the central purpose of an item? First and foremost, its main function is to supplement the champion. Whatever end goal or win condition the champion has, items are meant to facilitate them getting to that win condition faster and to enable them to more consistently access their most powerful state. A possible secondary function of an item is to act as a response to the enemy's win condition by mitigating or diminishing the impact of their most powerful state. Those 2 goals are the central purposes of items. From then on, you decide what order of items you want to purchase in a way that's most conducive to your champion at whatever stage of progression they're on. Some are meant to be more efficient in the early game, while others are meant to be more optimal late game. The popularity of an item is heavily predicated on the role it fulfills across those who want to buy them. If there are multiple champions and/or multiple scenarios where the item in question is greatly needed, that of course results in them being purchased more often. A classic staple ever since the game came out is Infinity Edge, an item with a linear purpose, give you lots of AD and stronger crits. This has to be arguably the most purchased item throughout all of League of Legends. Practically every game features either one or both AD carries purchasing this. Why? Because the goal of an ADC is to deal damage. Their method of doing so comes in the form of auto attacks, of which the stat most conducive to high auto attack damage are critical strikes. Infinity Edge may be nothing but a stat stick, however it provides the right combination of stats to facilitate exactly what a marksman is trying to achieve. Another item that's been purchased quite often throughout Season 14 is Eclipse. Similarly to Infinity Edge, Eclipse provides a healthy amount of AD along with a small bit of ability haste. In addition, it comes with an item passive wherein every so often, applying 2 attacks or abilities to an enemy champion within 2 seconds deals bonus max health damage and grants the wielder a short-lasting shield. With the vast majority of combat exchanges in the early to mid-game consisting of short trades, an item that can simultaneously enhance your trade damage while mitigating your opponent's is a pragmatic weapon of choice for your first purchase. Items can also be popular in response to certain things. Sonya's Hourglass is one of the most commonly bought defensive items in the game by mages for its ability to temporarily exempt the wielder from any pressure thrusted onto them, and in some cases directly shut down an enemy's most powerful tool. In light of burst damage and hard engage being ubiquitous in this day and age, running into a situation where being able to enter stasis for a brief moment can be life-saving is not a matter of if, but when. Knowing all this, we now have a basic idea for the motive behind purchasing an item, which means we can now look into why people don't buy certain items. For an item to be appealing, it either has to lend itself to a wide number of champions win conditions, or it has to be effective at responding to a wide number of champions win conditions. Other factors such as gold efficiency and whatnot also play into it as well, but if it fails to capture either core aspect, it will subsequently be a quote-unquote pointless item that hardly anyone buys. Perhaps the least popular item currently still purchasable is Quicksilver Sash. Despite having been available since the dawn of time, QSS almost never sees play in the average game. The only time you'd see players actually buying this are in the rare circumstances where it would be obviously irresponsible not to. Not known for its base stats, QSS is instead known for its effect, removing all crowd control with the exception of knockups from the user. If you get hit by a Morgana Q, press QSS and you can move again. Considering crowd control is often, if not invariably, the deciding metric of a team fight, one would think having a get out of jail free card for that possibility would make for an appealing purchase. And on paper, you're not necessarily wrong, but the thing about crowd control is that barring notable ones like long range Ash Arrow or Morgana Q or Nico Empowered E, the bulk of crowd control effects only range between 1 to 2 seconds. By the time the average human reaction notices they're hit by a crowd control, no less than half a second has elapsed, at which point the hard CC is already halfway done, so you spent 1300 gold just to cleanse half a second of hard CC. Of course, if you're expecting to get hit by it, then you can cleanse most crowd control on reaction, typically resulting in the biggest threat to your life no longer being relevant. But unless the enemy team has multiple long-lasting hard CCs, the practical benefit you acquire for a 1300 gold purchase is often not quite there. Furthermore, QSS only releases the crowd control you're affected by, not the crowd control that comes after or the damage that potentially comes with it. Frequent targets for QSS are the suppression champions, Malzahar and Warwick to name a few. Being the only way to get rid of suppress, it's indeed helpful against them, but it doesn't stop their damage. So even if you do cleanse it, Malzahar will still burn your entire health bar, or Warwick will still heal a bunch. Alternatively, if you get hit by crowd control and then cleanse it, but then get hit by something else immediately after, the QSS has been ironically nullified. Oftentimes the impact of hard CC is not based on how long it is, but rather that you have it to begin with. Even a single moment of disruption is enough to put someone in a precarious situation. Aatrox's Q sweet spots are no more than a quarter-second knockup each, and yet it feels painful to get hit by even one of them. Granted, many champions are greatly dependent on their 1 hard CC for their pressure. Ahri depends on Charm to guarantee both hits of her Q. Veigar usually needs to land Event Horizon if he wants to guarantee Dark Matter. While not hard CC, without Wither, Nasus basically doesn't exist. Under those circumstances, yes, QSS effectively shuts down their entire game plan. Or rather, it shuts down only one rotation of their game plan. Another issue with QSS is how long the item active's cooldown is, 90 seconds at the time of writing this. During the mid to late game, a champion's main hard CC ability can be thrown every 5 to 10 seconds, so even if you do cleanse a Morgana Q, a second one will come shortly after. There may be instances where having Quicksilver Sash for a team fight 45 minutes into the game can be the X factor for whether your team wins or loses, but on average, that's 1 out of 100 games, if that. Finally, one other reason behind the low purchasability of QSS pertains to opportunity cost. Item slot efficiency is an unspoken yet critical aspect of a champion's progression. If you purchase Quicksilver, you forfeit that slot, a slot that could have been filled by an item with more stats. Hypothetically, you're playing Lucian and you got your core items, Essence, IE, Boots, Navori, and Fire Cannon. For your final item, you might feel compelled to run a Last Whisper to counter everyone else building some semblance of armor, or you might want Bloodthirster to stay in the fight even if you take damage. If you build Mercurial Scimitar, you won't have the benefits of those other purchases. Again, if the only thing you have to worry about on the enemy team is a Morgana Q, then maybe QSS would be the smartest option. But even with that consideration, you're missing out on other stuff. What's more is that responses to crowd control can be found in other ways. You can run Cleanse, a summoner spell with not only the ability to clear you of all crowd control, but even some debuffs like Ignite or Exhaust, followed by a significant tenacity buff for 3 seconds. It might not clear suppression, but suppression is inherently uncommon. Another answer would be to just power through the crowd control. Most bruisers, tanks, or even skirmishers see little reason to buy QSS when they tend to have the resilience to survive whatever punishment that comes shortly after. In their case, it would have made more sense to just build an item that can give them that guaranteed reward, such as building kind of Grukern or Maw or Sterix. Not only do those items protect you from damage that might accompany crowd control, but they simply protect you in general. There's also always the option to, dodge the attack. Point and click hard CC rarely if ever lasts longer than 1 second. We've already established that by the time the average person reacts to getting hard CC'd, about a quarter to half a second has already passed. Assuming they weren't preemptively looking to cleanse it, the majority of hard CC that's 2 seconds or longer are skill shots, which can either be avoided by dashing or sidestepping, or you can stand behind someone and have them act as a human shield. Point is, alternatives for responding against hard CC exist, questioning the practicality of wasting an item slot and no less than 1300 gold on something that can only be used once every 90 seconds. Now, historically, QSS used to remove all negative effects, including debuffs. It was famously used to counter Zed's death mark by removing it before it applied the splat damage, and until recently, most people took it to prevent Mordekaiser from ulting them. These were critical buffs where QSS was effectively the only way to get rid of them. Now, however, the only differentiation between QSS and Cleanse is that QSS can clear suppression while Cleanse can clear summoner spells, but like I just mentioned, unless you're facing a team of like Warwick top, Skarner jungle, Malzahar mid, and Tahm Kench support, realistically you have no reason to waste money on this, especially since Merc Sim doesn't really lend itself to the goals of any champion. I'll remind you that the two central motives behind buying an item are 1. Because it helps you get to your optimal state, or 2. Because it helps you deal with your opponent's optimal state. QSS expectantly falls into the latter category, but because the payoff is so minuscule and there are many other ways to address crowd control, it almost never gets purchased. Reactive purchases in general are unpopular to begin with, considering you buy them only when necessitated. In the case of QSS, the number of actual situations where you'd want to buy it over other potential items is so infinitesimal. I spent a lot of time talking about QSS, but before we end the video, let's include a couple more examples: Abyssal Mask and Fimbulwinter. Like QSS, Abyssal Mask has been around for a long time, and yet despite going through several iterations over the years, it remains to this day the least purchased tank item in the game. Perhaps throughout the summer it started to see a bit of play after getting reworked in 14.10 and then a big buff in 14.15, but nonetheless, finding any semblance of consistent use of this item is few and far between. Regardless of which iteration, the principle remains the same. Abyssal Mask is a tank item designed to cause nearby enemies to take increased magic damage. Very simple. Considering most tanks deal magic damage anyway, this item may not look too bad, especially when accounting for the recent buffs to it. It's essentially an AP Black Cleaver for tanks, and you might even see a Battle Mage building in like Swing given his penchant for fighting in mid-range with his ultimate. I'd say the reason behind Abyssal's poor popularity is because tanks are not known for dealing damage, yet the item is targeted towards tanks. The goal of a tank is to be resilient and to cause as much disruption for the enemy team as possible, not to be the DPS of the team. I'm aware that a tank could build this if they have a lot of magic damage on their team, but with solo queue fostering an every player for themselves mentality given how discordant the environment is, it's better to go for items that have assured value, and in the case of MR items, Spirit Visage, Kinetic Current, and Force of Nature offer a lot more. Secondarily, the priorities of Abyssal compete with other items that achieve the same end result. Though small in number, you can make a case for Abyssal to be effective on AP Bruisers, as they usually go half damage, half tank. But if they're trying to build a defensive item that gives damage, they can instead opt for a health item that gives actual damage like Leandri's or Riftmaker. And for the defensive item, they would just full commit to a defensive item like Spirit Visage or FON. The only ones who consistently build Abyssal would be maybe Zac or Mumu since they're usually more DPS oriented, and perhaps Udyr. But again, much of that has to do with the item getting buffed in recent times. For most of the time Abyssal was in the game, it practically never got built because mages would rather build a tank busting damage item than a tank busting tank item, tanks would rather build a more tank focused item, and AP Bruisers would rather build an AP Bruiser item. Abyssal Mask was neither a proactive or reactive purchase. Final item will be Fimbulwinter, the Tear of the Goddess item for tanks. This is an interesting one. Fimbulwinter on paper appears to be incredibly useful. It gives a ton of HP, a ton of mana, and every time you slow or CC a target, you get a shield. It's like the tank version of Eclipse. So what's wrong with it? Well, for one, it simply takes too long to get going. Tier items are built early so you can scale them later, but this item offers no offensive benefit whatsoever. If you recall in my tank items video, I went over tanks rushing Sunfire, Thornmail and stuff for their offensive connotations to put on meaningful solo pressure since they're not able to do their normal tank duties until the mid to late game. Obviously, Fimbulwinter will take way too long to get to where it needs to be, and even then, it offers no armor and magic resist, which are more crucial for the early game when you're fighting just one source of damage as opposed to health being better for late game when you're taking both kinds of damage. Moreover, tanks don't particularly have issues with mana the way mages or fighters do, so there's seldom a situation where you would need an extra 1000 mana. But let's say you like spamming abilities. Once again, opportunity cost. You could go Fimbulwinter, or you can go Frozen Heart, which yields more focused efficiency and immediate combat pressure. Another possible incentive to build it would be for the extreme amounts of bonus health you get. But tank items don't have the same mana stacking infrastructure that AP items do. Therefore, trying to build HP through mana is not as accessible. It also doesn't help that most HP based champs are manaless like Zac and Mundo. If building tons of health is your primary concern, you may as well go Heartsteel, which offers actual damage in addition to big HP. Overall, pointless items are pointless due to failing to either be helpful at working towards a win condition or working against your opponents, as well as the existence of alternatives that can do a similar job but with more efficiency and practical return to it. If these items offered a special form of utility that could not be replicated by anything else, like how Zhonya's is the only way you can stasis, then maybe they'd be purchased more often. But in their current state, they're just too niche and situational that you'd be actually hurting yourself by building them on most champions than if you were to just build anything else. As for how to fix them, you can rework it to have a one-of-a-kind effect that's versatile enough to be worth consideration, or you can always take the easy way out and buff the stats to high heaven so people abuse it for just the stats alone. That's what they did with Hullbreaker back in Season 13, and we all know how bad of an idea that was. Anyways, what do you guys think about these quote-unquote pointless items? Do you think they should be taken out of the game, or are they good to have just for the sake of having them? You're welcome to share in the comments down below. That's it for today though, so if you enjoyed the video, a like and subscribe would be much appreciated. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter @Vars, join my Discord server, and check out my other item discussions if you haven't yet. But till next time, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.